Hey, baby, it's Bonnie DuShong, and this is Bonnie's Eye, where we have great conversations with interesting people. And this young man is someone that I found to be quite interesting. His life has been an experience, and he wrote a documentary about a teacher who influenced him to be the man he is today. Mr. Demetrius Matthews, how are you?
I am doing good. How are you?
I am doing I'm doing good also. Demetrius just became a father of nine. Um, his dog had puppies.
Yeah, Old English Bulldog. So yeah.
I love it. Demetrius, before we get into the documentary, Kling, a teacher who defied the system, let's talk about you a little bit and your upbringing here on the west side of Chicago. So tell us a little bit about you.
Well, basically, I was born in the west side of Chicago. My mom, she had me when she was a young mom, and so a lot of things. I come from a large family. She had lots of siblings, so she had about maybe eight or nine, 8 or 9 brothers and sisters, and they all moved from Arkansas into Chicago during that time where more jobs were in Chicago, and so they settled on the west side of Chicago. And my mom. So basically, me growing up, you know, um, I had two younger sisters that lived with me, my mom and I, and so basically, it was she. She always gave me a sense of responsibility. She sometimes she apologized. She said, I made you grow up too fast, but being the oldest son, looking after my sisters and picking them up from school, making sure they do their homework, that was just my normal day. So I really didn't know about much of a childhood, I would say, after looking back at that. And but I'm happy. I'm happy with the results, and we're all happy and we're all healthy. And so, but in my early grade school years, the teachers were, I guess this is what's happening, pretty much regularly now. Where they told my mom I was slow. I had a learning disorder. And so, and I heard it, but that was something that I guess they were just kind of accustomed to having these conversations with parents. And that I felt really bad, but at an early age, I felt the sense of rejection and not being good enough. This is like fourth grade. And so my mom, she buckled down. She was also a college student, and she also was going to school day and night. She also worked part time, as a nurse. So into doing all this time where we were growing up. And so she took out more time. She made sure that I understood my lessons. And she told me, she said, you're being tested on things that you were never taught, you know.
Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, but as the story turns too, is that that's when I think sixth grade, they had a group. We were a group of students that ended up, being some of Mr. Clean students. There were about 35 of us to start.
Well, in watching the documentary, and everybody, this is back in the 80s. This is like what, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87,
Yep,
in that
88. Yep.
time. Yeah, in that time frame. And I want all of you to go back and think about that, the teaching at that time, and that one teacher that kind of helped you make it through. Because just like Demetrius said, so many of us were deemed to not be smart, or not or to be in the remedial classes, because the testing at that time was the same testing across the board, and black students and brown students a lot hadn't been given the opportunity to learn the material. So then you got into Mr. Kling's class.
Yeah.
What happened?
It was almost like, looking back, I would say it was like a twilight zone. And not just for me, but many of my other classmates, is because here we were. You know, we were ushered through school, you know, grade after grade, and we all had a sense of feeling rejected or feeling like we're in the way. And not just the school system, just even like from society or even our, you know, some families where it's just like, well, here she go with all them kids, or, you know, and the teachers are really quick to discipline you, you know, and, you know, without any type of empathy, I would say. And so we all kind of felt a sense of like rejection, and or we felt damaged. And then here we have this, you know, Mr. Clean. He came in, and for everyone, we resonated with him because he showed us that he cared. And we were looking at each other like, why is he caring so much about us? You know, when we really never felt that before. And I think what that did, it ignited us to try to, because he's he delivered a presence where he believed in each and every last one of his students, you know. And so when we had someone believing in us so much, we never really wanted to let them down. So it pretty much made everybody come up with their A game and to really focus on what he was teaching us. And at the same time, his class, you know, he was very creative. I mean, he introduced us to so many different subjects, you know, and being with us for 3 years, he studied our learning styles, and he would break it down differently compared to what student that he's talking to.
And see, that's what I wanted to bring up too. This was during a time when they started the program where a class would be with the same teacher for 3 years. Is that correct? Am I saying
That's
that right?
correct. Yeah, that's correct.
So that gave him a chance to, and you guys also, to form that bond. But what was it like going into your class? Now, everybody, Mr. Kling is white.
Yeah.
Okay. So going into the class, here is this teacher. And on the first day, you know, and talking about giving you books like Black Boy and Man Child in the Promised Land and things like that. What was your real take on it in the beginning?
I think the first take on it, I think, is that, you know, on the west side of Chicago, most of the only white people you pretty much saw were teachers or police officers, you know, growing up as a child. And so, but with Mr. Kling is that, you know, my mom being a young mom, it's he would bring in these type of, we never really knew racism existed as children. And we would act out sometime. We'd be cracking jokes or throwing paper at each other, but he would get upset and he would say, that's what they want you to do. They want you to horse around. They want you to not pay attention to school. And we were looking like, who is they? Like, why could they? Like, who are you talking about? But and then as time went on, you know, we understood that it was basically, you know, some factions of white society in white America. And then he would tell us stories about when he go down south to visit, you know, with his wife, and you know, it was in, like, I think maybe North Carolina, South Carolina or something, where he had this black guy working for him, and the only thing he had to do, he would say, yeah, that's my worker. He called him the N word by name,
Mm.
and he just gave him Jack Daniels whiskey, and he'll do all this work for him, and he was bragging about it. But that's when it resonated that we realized who he was talking about. And
Mhm.
so and then these books he would give us, is like, that was the first time we really learned what was exposed to race relations. We didn't know that there was a system designed to trap us, you know, to hold us back, you know, to keep us from competing. You know, we didn't know about these systems. Even my mom didn't know. And she would say that this same Mr. Clean would talk about these things and give you all these books. I never knew that this would happen to you being a young black, you know, boy, male, and growing up, and there you'll be targeted so much. You know, Mr. Clean must have knew something, you know, back then. But yeah, he pretty much, he exposed us to a lot. We also had debating, you know, I mean, every level when it came to, you know, he just really made sure we understood, you know, the world and society that was around us, as well as really focusing on English and math.
Well, in the documentary, um, Mr. Kling seems so emotional throughout the documentary. He seems like, I mean, he talks about how when he was growing up, he could feel and see the injustices, just like the example you gave of when he went down south and met the guy that that had the black worker. But he seems to be upset. I mean, you can really feel his emotions through the interviews and how he feels about our country and how it's treating people of color all the way around. How was it interviewing him as a grown man?
I understood more as being an adult. We always knew he was very, very passionate when he taught. This was every day. And he would be so passionate by the way he taught us. And so sometimes we would feel like he would take on the war more than we knew and what it was. And then once we started to progress, as far as like testing and passing these tests that wasn't designed for us, or they didn't give us the curriculum, to prepare for it, and we were acing it, testing out in high school levels, and all of this attention started coming on him and in our classroom. But interviewing him as an adult is, I began to think again, where it's like, man, I questioned myself and I talked to my mom and my dad and I said, why me? Because I realized that we were very, very fortunate to have this man, to come and sit with us for 6 years, to sacrifice everything pretty much, And I really didn't understand too, like after 8th grade, that he kind of went into a depression and, he was kind of, suffering things within his family, in his household because of, being so dedicated to us.
Yeah.
So sitting with him as an adult is like, I felt like, why me? So yeah.
But he remembered each one of you. One of the things that I realized when I was watching the documentary and also reading your bio a little bit here, you guys were kind of like in a special cocoon in his class, because when you left, it seems like all of the stuff that he was afraid was going to hit you or try to prepare you for actually came down on your shoulders.
Yeah, it came down really hard in the 8th grade. I got an ulcer towards the end of 8th grade, trying to figure out what high school to go to. And it's like to the point where my mom's a poet as well. And so I would write poems with her back and forth. That was my fun as a child growing up. And so I wrote a poem called Black Peter Pan. I mean, I felt I didn't want to grow up. And I was sitting to my mom, like when I was maybe in 7th grade, and beg her, please don't let me drop out of school. Please don't let me drop out of high school. And I was begging her these things. And she was like, your grades are good. Why are you even thinking about something like that? But I kind of saw people around me changing when they left, 8th grade. Older people in my neighborhood began to change, and I didn't want to and it was for worse, and I didn't want to change, and I didn't want to go out there. So because he kept us away from a lot of things, because he challenged us mentally, but at the same, and he also was preparing us. But yeah, it was very stressful. How he kept us, and then once we went out, it came. But those tools that he gave me, I got in trouble, eventually in high school. But a lot of people that I was around, in my cousins in my age group and my peers, they didn't have anything to fall back on. And so in high school, it's pretty much, I could have tested out of high school. That's how advanced he had us. And so yeah, so I had something to fall back on once I realized that what am I doing?
So once that hard head got opened up, huh? You knew you had to go another route.
I could hear everybody words so clearly.
Well, it's something else too, that when you guys in the documentary, you explain that all the kids in your class were called the nerds and would be picked on by other kids in the school because you guys were smart or you were learning in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah, it was coming from a lot of different things. Once that newspaper article came out, and it was in the seventh grade, and then so here's Mr. Kling. He was a law student. He was going to school. He was going to be a lawyer. He decided to teach. And he ended up being a teacher for 35 years. But he saw how the curriculum was so behind and so boring. Not just I wouldn't say boring, but just like it just wasn't good enough. And so he would use his own money to purchase books for us. And so these other teachers looking at him, and then he has this article, which is basically paying off, showing that his hard work is paying off. And then his peers, his teachers, they would kind of talk about him and, try to say he was on a mission. And they would also kind of leak that out to their children. And now all these kids are like, okay, we have newspapers, news stations in our classroom filming us, for like the last, 2 years. And they were coming, actually, Michelle Norris, she wrote the article and she followed us for the next 2 years. And so having all this attention and then the other classrooms, they were like, okay, those are the nerds. And so, and so we would end up fighting, almost every day, coming home and we became like those, like I said, like those fighting nerds.
It's like
What
the
happens
fighting
when,
nerds.
yeah, the fighting nerds. So, and so eventually, that wore off. But yeah, it was an interesting time. But it was really hard for him too because you can see that the peers. One time he was accused of cheating. They said there's no way these kids could be, you know, uh, coming out with these high test scores. In the west side of Chicago, one of the worst school districts in Chicago, and you have these kids, in seventh grade having high school tests, Iowa tests and standardized test scores. And so they decided to switch teachers. So during the standardized testing time, he would have to go into another classroom and swap him out because they were saying that he was cheating.
Oh
I
my
mean, so there
God.
was a lot of things that were on him. And he also, what happens too is when you have a teacher that's really working, he make the other teachers have to work. So light is kind of shining on them. It's like, okay, now I have to work, you know. So that's
So
how I think it was with him.
when you decided to do this documentary, what was in your heart? I mean, what made you one day say, I'm going to do a documentary on Mr. Clean?
Well, I never thought about doing a documentary on Mr. Clean because like my background is not film, it's accounting and computer science. I'm a programmer, but and I run an IT consulting firm. So what happened is that I always wanted to write a story. So I published a poetry book with my mom. So I had those type of skills and I always wanted to write the story of Mr. Clean. And I told him one time because we would get together for pizza, go to Home Run Inn for pizza in Chicago, or we would meet at restaurants like every other year, all of our classes, and we would have Mr. Clean come out. And so I say, well, I'm going to write a book. I want to write a book about us. And I want to tell you a story. He says, and he told me, he looked at me, he said, if anyone going to write my book, I want it to be you. And so, and that was like about maybe 6 years ago, maybe about 6, 7 years ago. And so what happened is that I ended up losing my nephew, to gun violence. I started sampling with music and video recording. I started a little small, business with that. But I did it to keep my nephews and my cousins out of jail and out of trouble. And I figured I say, okay, maybe I could meet them there. If they're really interested in music and they're really interested in, being an artist or musician or rap videos or whatever, maybe I can meet them there and then give them the tools and educate and bring them up. And so that's what I was trying to do. So I opened up a series of music and video recording studios in Minneapolis and in Chicago. And so I was kind of gathering the youth and coming in there and just kind of showing them how to work the cameras and things. So I always had like a fascination for cameras and cinematography. And so, but just a couple years ago, I ended up losing my nephew. And so that kind of really, and he had so much talent and there were so many things he wanted to do. And he reminded me really of myself, and I just decided, I say, you know what, life is too short. I have things that I want to do. And so my first thing was like, I've done a lot of things that I wanted to do, don't get me wrong, but the thing that I really needed to put effort to, I say, I want to tell Mr. Kling's story. I want to do a documentary on that because I had the tools and I was, capable of doing that at that point. And so I gave him a call. And then he was totally on board. So the next couple of weeks, we drove down there. I packed up my brother. He was my younger brother, 16 years old. I packed up my assistant director and editor, Jerome. He recently graduated film school. I was working with him on projects. And so we drove down to Chicago and we interviewed Mr. Kling. And so I just basically thought about just doing this, for us. I was doing it for, I didn't think about it as creating a business. I didn't think about it as making money on it. It's just something I wanted to do because we were all getting older. And I was like, God forbid, if something ever happens to him, then I got to go in front of his family, and tell him how great of a man he is. I say, I want to give him his flowers while he's alive, and so that's what happened. And it's just starting now. It's just starting to spiral out of control.
Well,
It's taking on its own entity.
well, in watching it and the emotions that are going on, especially with him, you can, as he's speaking of leaving Evanston and coming to the West Side to teach you guys, you can see his feelings and his emotions, and then having to leave and go to another school because of his family and everything. You can really feel his dedication and, like you said, his passion. But it also looks like most of the people in your class rather, did pretty good for themselves. They had their ups and downs, but most of them did well.
Yep, exactly. We all tumbled after 8th grade. We tumbled in high school, big time, most of us. But at the end that we all did, the majority of the classmates that we have did doing very, very well. One, Israel, he's one of my former classmates. He's working in DC, for the CIA, it's cybercrime, and the FBI. So, I mean, based off the math that Mr. Kling taught us, we have another, we had a math professor, Jamil, he was teaching math at college. I mean, so like it's so many, everyone is pretty much is doing really good. And the story always ends back. My story is no different from their story. It all ends back to Mr. Kling. And they're like, what makes this guy so special? I mean, he was your 6th, 7th, and 8th grade teacher. You had high school, you had college. Why is he so special? Because he gave us the foundation, and he gave us the foundation. I mean, I would go back into when I started corporate America, and when I made a mistake, my mistakes were like the whole ceiling, being an accountant in corporate America as an intern. When I make a mistake, you would think that the roof was burning, you know. But my coworker, which was a white kid, he made a mistake and it was worse than I did. And she pat him on his back and said, it's okay. And I'm like, whoa. And then Mr. Kling started saying, you got to be 3 times, 6 times more better than me just to compete with me. But that taught me, a lesson. And from that point on, I double check and triple check my work and made sure that I was always the best I could be. And that's just how it is. We're going to be looked at and we're going to be scrutinized and we're going to be judged right off, and so we're really not allowed to make mistakes, not at work, not even in life, and so Mr. Kling, he told us that, and he said we have to work extra hard, and it's sad, but that's just what we have to do.
Well, I'm sure that those out there listening are looking back at that one teacher that made a difference. And I'm going to tell you, for watching this documentary, there's different parts of it, beautiful shot scenes of the city. I got to tell you,
Thank you.
whoever your cinematographer is or whatever, I mean, the city, the shots are beautiful. Um, but when you watch this, when I watched this, I thought back to my theater teacher in college and whatever. But I'm sure all of us have that one person that went overboard. I mean, here's a man
Mhm.
who went out of his pocket to buy black books that most school districts in the 80s would, or even 70s
Yeah,
or some 90s, would not allow in the curriculum. And he bought them themselves and brought them to you and taught them to you and taught you to respect your knowledge and yourself. And I just thought that it's a wonderful documentary about this man and about your journeys.
thank you.
Yep. So where
Thank
can
you.
we see it? Where can everybody see it?
Well, it's right now. It's on Amazon Prime. Just search KLING, KLING, and it's also on Tubi, Tubi streaming services, TUBI, and so it's listed up on Tubi as well. So far so good.
Demetrius, do you have another documentary or film in you that you're getting ready to come out with?
Well, right now is like I said, is that this is I just decided to let this push me and take me, wherever God, has in store. And so now I'm getting a lot of comments as far as like, where's the movie? We need to see the movie. So I'm writing the script right now, movie script of the 3 years that we were, clean kids. And yeah, so I'm writing a movie script on those 3 years. And then yeah, so we're starting from that point there.
Well, that sounds
Um,
good. I can't wait to see it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So we're working on it. We'll see how it goes. And but the filming, my editor was Jerome. He did a really good job about it. And like I had the cameras. I'm really really into cinematography, and I didn't go to school for this. I learned watching YouTube as well as some master classes on how to direct. So I was preparing myself, to go interview Mr. Clean. And so I had master class on, and I was just looking at other art directors and directors and producers. And I was just cramming all of that up. And so once I got there on that Friday, I was ready.
Well, you did a fabulous job. I mean, the colors are crystal clear. The city never looked more beautiful. So yeah, yeah, I think you got something going there,
Okay, thank
Demetrius.
you. Well,
And
thank you.
you gotta let me know so we can talk about your next venture.
Yes, yes, I would love to too. And I was really honored. You're a big name in the industry, you're a big name in Chicago. And it's like I was really honored. I'm like, wow, she wants to interview me. I was prepared for this like the last five. So I have puppies that I'm feeding. And also I'm prepared for like you, and I was watching your videos, but you make it so easy to talk to you because you smile and you laugh and you have great energy.
Oh, thank you,
So
Demetrius.
yes, thank you too. So only thing I want is I just want every teacher in the world, every teacher in the country to watch this film because I think that, I just think they have a really tough job. And I think this can kind of give them a little bit to say, you know what, there is light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah,
That there is. And, hats off to all the teachers who are going that extra mile. You know, all of your students are individual people. And the ones of you that recognize that and can work toward their strengths, hats off and applause to all of you. And hats off and applause to you, Demetrius.
thank you.
So, everybody, until next time, keep your eye to the sky.